Would you like to come and see Path to Power live? Well, there are two opportunities for you to do so in the middle of September. On the 11th, which is a Wednesday, we're going to be playing the Olympia Theatre in the centre of Dublin. Tickets available from ticketmaster.ie. And then 2 nights later in Cork at the Cork Opera House as part of the Cork Podcast Festival, it's Path to Power Podcast Live, and tickets there from corkoperahouse.ie. Now, welcome to the programme. And you're very welcome to Path to Power on our special pre-recorded August edition. And we're praying that since we recorded this, that nothing big has actually happened to make any of this redundant. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
So let's talk about a few things that I suppose have been rumbling over the last few months, or maybe not rumbling as much as they used to, or maybe should have been. I want to start with health, because I'm really taken by how in recent months surveys have suggested that health is starting to really drop down for voters as an important issue to them. That it would have been considered back at the time of the 2020 general election, health, the old age pension and housing were the three major issues. In recent times, everyone's been saying health, housing and immigration. But actually, if you dig into the various surveys done, health isn't really there as big an issue for many people as it used to be. I wonder why that is.
Well, I feel politically very close to health because my big break in politics came in 1988, where I was taken from the backbenches, having supported Dukes, and he didn't make any changes on his first reshuffle, appointed me to the health portfolio. This was at a time of the Tallaght strategy, but also a time of horrendous cutbacks. Rory O'Hanlon, who actually became to know quite well subsequently, and his son. But the truth is that it was the issue of the election, waiting lists. So our policy was, which I inherited from Bernard Allen, which was to set up, instead of 6 regional health boards, on board Sláinte, which actually went on to be the HSE, where you'd have more cost-effective buying.
It's your fault.
Flight to scale and all this.
It's your fault.
No,
you were the father of the HSE.
I can assure you there are benefits to having a centralised body like the NHS. So you're absolutely right. On the one hand, some progress has been made on waiting lists, and definitely the figures on life expectancy, cardiac-related, cancer-related, and the National Cancer Strategy has some merit to it.
But wouldn't it want to be, given how much money we spend on health? Because I think of the 33 leading countries in the OECD, we have the 6th highest expenditure per capita.
Yes, and the money thing is really significant. Health spending over the last 2 years has gone up 2.7 billion. If you stand back and look at it, we're now spending 25 billion on health. A matter of several years ago, we were on 13 billion. It is nearly doubled in money. So,
and has productivity doubled? Have outcomes improved?
So in fairness, the first thing you have to say is this: 65% of all health spending is pay. So actually, it's a people business. If you don't have the nurses and doctors and diagnostic people and radiologists and all of that, or community nurses, you're going nowhere.
And in fairness, would we begrudge them that? Because I've actually been spending a bit of time recently, for reasons I won't go into, but appointments out in Tallaght Hospital. And between the nurses that I've been dealing with in the clinic that I've been attending, and between the people who do your bloods and all the rest of it, these are terrific people, and they're also working hard. You can see how hard they're working, how many people they're trying to look after. Speaking to the woman who was doing the bloods, just how many starting from very early in the morning, how many cases she would do in a day, and then off into the wards as well. That the frontline workers work hard and deserve to be compensated for it. And for all about the government not wanting to spend more money, well, they're probably going to have to, or else those nurses are going to be heading off to work overseas, or if they go, they're not going to be coming back.
So on the numbers, and so you're absolutely right, once you get into the Irish health system, it's very good.
It's
accessing it is not so easy. And that's hence the problem with the waiting list. On the people side of it, since 2014, 50,000 more people are going to work in it. And as we've said so often in this, 2014, 2024, what's paid for everything? Corporation tax has gone from 4 billion to 24 billion.
Yes, so of those 50,000, is there a breakdown between those who would do sort of clinical work, as in doctors and nurses and people who help patients, and those who are in administration. Because one of the big bugbears has been that, do we have too many people involved in administration? Pen pushing, paper shuffling, things that if we had proper investment in electronic records and stuff, we wouldn't need all of these people. But there's a perception that, apart from people saying it's too hard to actually computerize the whole system to the degree that people say it would be, that the fear is that too many people would lose their jobs as a result of it, and no government wants to take that on.
I don't have that breakdown. It's usually put at 1-to-1, which sounds bizarre. Since 2020, numbers have gone up by 28,000. Where the health system has lost its credibility fiscally is the budget overruns every year. Either the budget figure picked in October for this year, for 2025, was not credible in the beginning, but the average overrun, it is just inexplicable relative to any other department, an average 590 million. So, they cannot control their budgets is a slamming indictment of them. My own view is that there hasn't been, the number of people in outpatients in the last year dropped by a third. That is actually a very empirical people. Well, how many people did you see in outpatients? And so therefore, the output of health, I don't think, has given value for money. And I actually think the real way to get better value for money, one, is technology, where you simply, there's so many technologies, even for appointment systems, that if someone cancels at the last minute, it automatically goes on to the next person on the list and so on, as opposed to having no shows and all this. But changing the rosters. If you have a CAT scan equipment that costs €1 million, why should it be idle on a Saturday and a Sunday? You've got to move to a 7-day system and change the rosters. This is one of the innovations of international health. But I have to say that if you look at private health expenditure and the inflation in that, it's equally very high. If you look at the Mater, look at Beacon and all of these, so leave aside the inefficiencies or otherwise of the HSE. The other point I would make is the whole idea of sending Robert Watt over to Bagot Street to run the Department of Health. Here is a guy who had made his record career out of being a hard-ass guy on not spending money in Deeper and in the Department of Finance. And what does he turn around and do? Have even worse budget overruns. The gamekeeper has turned into a poacher.
Or could it be that it just shows how difficult the whole thing is? But you see, there's all sorts of other things coming up. One of the things that's quite extraordinary at present, if you follow it, is the new drugs that are available to deal with all sorts of illnesses, which can be very expensive at present. And this is causing all sorts of issues as well about whether the government is actually going to spend the money on the new drugs for as many people. And you can say, well, we can't afford to be spending things that might cost €1,000 for a particular dose. But on a social side, is that what you're supposed to be doing to keep people alive and give them a better standard of living? Also, could it be that it becomes a worthwhile investment? Because if you keep people healthier with these drugs, they're not going to need the long-term care that otherwise they would be receiving within the health system. So there's that balance. And that's one thing that needs to be looked at. The other thing, which I think could be an issue at local level, although I don't think anyone really has a solution for this, is the lack of GPs throughout the country. This is a major problem. And the reason that some people go directly to the emergency department is that they can't actually get an appointment with their GP. And some GPs that I've been talking to, okay, now maybe they're playing their own game in addition to this one, but they're saying with the cards that for free medical cards and underage cards, with the expansion of those schemes, that people who don't necessarily need to make an appointment are making them because it doesn't cost them any money. And then that means that they're with queues out the door. They don't have enough doctors to actually provide the service, particularly in the various clinics. And then people end up going to the hospital prematurely or when they don't necessarily need to go at all. And then in rural Ireland, where you have with older doctors retiring, you have a situation, is anyone going to be willing to actually come in and take up? And it's the thing is that a rural doctor presumably can make a very good living, but they need to do it probably in a group because they don't want the lifestyle, do they, of being expected to be on call nearly 24/7 unless they have support structures around them.
Well, on the manpower side, not only that, you take the whole mental health service, the CAMs and so on. to actually recruit psychiatric consultants to the Northwest and to Kerry has been a real problem. And therefore the waiting lists have been completely different in different parts of the country simply because they couldn't recruit. You know, you have a much larger opportunity for private practice patients if you're in St. Pat's or in Dublin for mental health services. So there
if you could afford it, and if you've got the private health insurance.
But like, let's be clear. The first thing I learned when I did a deep dive in the 80s into this is that healthcare from a political perspective is an unwinnable war. Because if, eureka, we've made people live 10 years longer, we're solving cancer problems, we're solving all these problems, we have new drugs, you know what happens? In their 80s, when they croak in their 90s, they're getting more orthopedic surgery, they're getting more different care. So actually, it's self-defeating because demand is infinite and resources are finite. You know, how many diagnostic tests do you do on someone who's 101? Do you say, oh, hold on a minute, you've had a good run here? You know what I mean? Like, we want to refer you to the Undertaker now.
Right. Okay. Well, the question...
No, that is the truth of it. Like if you actually look at pure economics, it's self-defeating because people, as they become more frail, as they become more elderly, their needs rocket upward, and that is just an unwinnable war. But I do think you are right about the layers of administration need to be cut back.
Actually, just as an aside, it just struck me as well, maybe again it's the age that I'm at now as well, the amount of people I meet who've had new hips or they've had new knees or the rest of it, which they normally pay through via private insurance or they put money to stuff. Are you looking forward to the day when you could get a new back?
Well, no, I've been to hospital. They can't do anything more for me. So I had surgery. I've had all the different treatments. So I just have to kneel, as I'm now doing at the altar of Mac Cooper here once a week.
And do you feel that you got good treatment in the health service?
I will put it like this. Other members of my family, I would have to say, it once you can access it, the people who are waiting in pain for 2 years to get hospital treatment are the people who are losing out. The truth is, and like the truth is for all politicians, nearly everyone is in Leia, VHI, Irish Life
50% of the general population.
And the truth is that is
it's a two-tier system.
And the reason why you pay it is because you can jump
the queue. Preferential access.
You can, because there's private access. But and you know what? If you went for the board's launch of 100% state care and did away, like there's about 3 billion of money going in from the premiums. If you put everyone who's treated privately back on the state system, it wouldn't be able to cope. And secondly, if you go to hospitals like James's and look at the revenue they're getting, say, if you do away with that revenue, we'll have to close beds.
You mentioned earlier, political handicap of being a minister for health, but is it? Because everyone says, it's, going back to Brian Cowan's description of it, of Angola, where you just try and avoid the landmines. Yet Brian Cowan went on to become Taoiseach, albeit not too successfully. Micheál Martin is a former Minister for Health. Leo Varadkar is a former Minister for Health. Simon Harris is a former. Rather than being a political booby trap, it seems to be one of the fastest ways to get to the top.
But if you actually look at it, their time in health was quite short and they couldn't get out of it quick enough. Being
so
there,
you
done
survive
that.
it.
Yeah, exactly. If you survive it, I mean, there's. Well,
then what do you make of Stephen Donnelly's performance in relation to the Department of Health? He's been in there. I mean, he's not universally popular within Fianna Fáil, given that he came from a Democratic left background and then not Democratic left, sorry.
Soc
Dems, excuse me. Came from the Soc Dems, was a refugee who went to Fianna Fáil and got rewarded with a ministerial position by Micheál Martin, which was a clear indication that he felt that Donnelly, with his McKinsey background, could get things done. He's still in the job. So do you think have Fianna Fáil come round to feeling that, okay, after all, he's done reasonably well for us?
Well, first of all, Micheál Martin took a decision, whoever's in the opposition portfolio became the minister, and he's also taken a view there will be no reshuffle over the lifetime of the government. So he's greatly benefited from that. I would say he's turned into a safe pair of hands, but you would think with the McKinsey management consultancy background, he would have put some focus on value for money, some focus on efficiency. I would say the point of difference he's made is actually on issues like making the pill more available for young women free. And on the Liberal side of things, he took a strong line on the abortion, the protests outside of that. So actually his credentials have been more in the Liberal agenda than it has actually been in the medical agenda. But if you oversee over the last 5 years billions extra on health service, he will have spent money on University Hospital Limerick right across the country, and that will stand to him. So spending money is the easiest thing to do as a minister, and he's done that.
Given that we're recording this a couple of weeks in advance of broadcast, we hope that no new wars have broken out in the meantime. But one of the big stories of recent years obviously has been the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the support that we've given to the Ukrainian people as a non-member of NATO and as a military neutral country. And yet there are people trying to sort of get a discussion going as to whether that's feasible and whether we need to be spending more money on our own self-defence rather than actually piggybacking off Britain, America and indeed NATO for security in our seas in particular and in the air. Why is it that we seem unable to have a discussion in this country about the possibility of us being part of NATO without it being hijacked by people who describe wrongly NATO as being warmongers and without looking at it as an essential defence, particularly against Russia?
Well, if you just look before the Dáil went into recess, one of the decisions, there was a resolution that Ireland joined the European Defence Agency, which is a movement which is you're going to see in the lifetime of this commission and this parliament, whereby there will be a defence commissioner for the first time, there'll be a defence budget, and EU security will not just be the prerogative of NATO. So I think that is the sort of halfway house. So previously, we had what was called the triple lock. So,
don't we still have the triple lock in place?
Well, put it like this, we're getting rid of it, okay?
Will we get rid of it?
I think so the triple lock, just to explain it first of all, is Irish Defence Forces will not be deployed unless you tick 3 boxes. 1, the government decide to do it. 2, the Dáil votes for it. So this could be peacekeeping in Lebanon, or it could be peace enforcement in Croatia or Serbia or wherever it might be. And the third one is that it must be a UN Security Council resolution.
Which effectively gives Russia and China a veto over whether we get involved in doing what we believe is right. As peacekeeping, not as aggressors.
That's right. So therefore, the argument for getting rid of the triple lock is not a sort of war-hungry, gung-ho, testosterone-driven military approach. It's actually because the UN Security Council has been emasculated, as you say, by the vetoes. So there has been no Irish participation in a new thing that we would have done. However, I think we need to be realistic about this. First of all, there is an agreement between us and the UK that our airspace is being protected by the the RAF. And so therefore, it is phony. We don't even have the proper radar system that's required.
Should we not get our own? Should we not be investing in our own self-defence?
We should. And obviously, if you look, you spoke about the 2% commitment on spending side of the...
This is what, ironically, Donald Trump wants all European countries to be contributing more to NATO. And obviously that doesn't apply to us, has not been. But even within the EU, there is a realisation that more money has to be spent. And I know there's going to be people who say that's only money spent on guns and bombs and weapons of destruction and stuff. But, let's get real. You can't leave yourself defenceless against the likes of Russia. And you also need to spend money on cybersecurity in particular as well as part of that. And we have had experience. It's not just disinformation that the Russians are playing at as well. It's hacking into financial services. It's hacking into our health systems, our electrical grids and whatever. We need to do more to protect ourselves, particularly with all the undersea cables running between America and Europe, which run through Irish waters.
So, all valid. There are 32 states in NATO. Only 23 of them are meeting the 2% spending on defence budget. What are we spending? We're spending 1.2 billion, and that works out at 0.23%. So we're actually spending about 8% of what we should be spending, a multiple of 8 times we should be spending to meet that requirement. Now, let's be clear. Switzerland, Austria and Ireland are not members of NATO, but I think it's fair to say, and you've alluded to this, we share the same value system of democracy, respecting that, whether you like the result or not, freedom, which you won't get in your friend North Korea and in China, and you won't get in Russia. And what's changed since the Crimean invasion, followed by the Ukrainian invasion, is we have an existential threat to Europe's security. So it's not like the circumstances haven't changed, and we're not neutral about Putin, in my opinion. We're actually against him because he is not for our value system. And therefore, I think what we have to do through the European Defence Agency is see where can we play a role. We also have a specific problem, which are the transatlantic cables.
Yeah, and we also have other problems in that, if we were to be, by some miracle, part of NATO, given the political appetite doesn't seem to be there to allow even a discussion, let alone a decision to join it, what could we actually bring? Because at present we have understaffed defence forces and we have a serious lack of equipment. So we've already been talking about paying our nurses and doctors and others properly in the health service. A lot of people say we need to pay our Defence Force members an awful lot better to attract and to retain, to get the numbers up. We also have major issues in relation to behaviour within the Defence Forces, which is why you've had the Woman of Honour campaign as well, given that there has been horrendous misogyny and sexual cultural issues within the Defence Forces that need to be overcome. But money has to be spent on actually having proper equipment. And that doesn't mean that we will be getting equipment to send people off to war or anything like that. It means having enough aircraft to patrol our skies, to be able to see what's going on in our seas, and then having enough working ships that we can actually send, if not even to intercept Russians who might be trying to damage undersea cables, they can do a job as well in trying to protect our people and the people of Europe from the scourge of drugs by intercepting the drug smugglers who at the moment find the Irish coast easy prey.
Well, one of the things that costs nothing that we could do, and I'd like to hear your view on this, you've had people over the years like Claire Daly, Mick Wallace and Boyd Barrett and all these people who go berserk about NATO and American planes landing in Shannon. And my attitude is, well, if it's not, in fact, we're probably getting paid for it. And it's only to refuel and to stop over. In that sense, I don't think we're neutral. Now, people might speak to the Israeli situation and the Gaza and so on. What's your view on this? Because, I mean, people do get their knickers in a huge knot about this. Well, I don't think it's justified.
Well, we talk about neutrality. We're militarily neutral in that we don't go to war, we don't take up arms, but there's nothing stopping us taking sides in a fight. I mean, that actually sells. So, we can say that the Russian invasion is wrong. So I suppose in this what comes down to the reason we have taken so many Ukrainians into the country, I think, is almost as a compensation for the fact that we are not contributing to the funding of the purchase of arms by Ukraine to try and defend itself against Russia and to try and regain the ground that it has lost to Russia. And so sometimes this sort of anti-war sentiment can tip into appeasement of aggressors. And you're actually awarding the likes of Russia by saying, why don't you just have a chat and sort this all out, which is part of the impression that you get. Then you get the other thing. Recently, on The Last Word, we had Jennifer Carroll McNeil had written a piece, the Fine Gael Junior Minister for European Affairs now. She'd written a piece in the Sunday Independent about increasing defence spending, if I remember rightly, from something like the current 1.2 with an intention of going to 1.5 billion a year, up to 3 billion. Not immediately, but saying that we needed to do that. And Mick Barry, the Cork North Central TD from People Before Profit, was in studio with her going, oh, no, let's spend that money in housing and hospitals instead. And you got to say that, well, yes, you want to spend money in housing and hospitals like we already do, but the money for those things come from the corporation tax receipts, and the American companies that are in Ireland want to be sure that the undersea cables that service them are still there. So you can say well, it doesn't matter if they get blown up. Well, yes, it does actually matter. And it might actually reduce the income and revenue you're getting from the various companies in this island that defend for things like that.
Yeah. An interesting sort of footnote on this. I was sent a book by Guild Publications of a new book that's coming out to review it. You know the way you put on your who built America or who built Ireland or who cares who built Ireland or whatever.
Really owns Ireland.
Who really owns Ireland. And you'd have on the thing on the back page that someone says, this is the best book ever. And so I was sent this book, Only a Soldier Knows by Ray Lane. And to be honest with you, I have always been a bit of a bête noire, the Defence Forces. Like, what are they doing? It's a tin pot army. They're just doing square bashing in the barracks here and there. They don't actually do any real fighting, or they don't, like, we don't have the tanks, we don't have the armoury, we don't have the planes. We can just about manage a fly past, and I've been very cynical about it. But actually, when I read this book, and he had spent 45 years in it, and he went on to be an international peacekeeper and almost a diplomat, it did open my eyes. Because you spoke about the cultural issue and the sort of misogyny and different, the assaults and different, and the whole culture of that, and it being a very male testosterone sort of culture. And he tells the story how he basically sort of dropped out of college and how he started and how tough it was to become a cadet and all this kind of thing. It does, and like the whole ethos of believing in defending the state and believing in part of your Irishness is a respect for the uniform and all of that. I have to say, it did open my eyes. It's a book well worth reading.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We will be back with the next part of Path to Power when we come back after this. Welcome back to Path to Power. And if you'd like to see us live, we are going to be at the Olympia on Wednesday, the 11th of September. Tickets are available from ticketmaster.ie. And 2 nights later, Friday the 13th of September, we'll be in Cork at the Cork Opera House, and it's corkoperahouse.ie for the tickets there. And I'm telling the truth when I say tickets are selling fast, so don't leave it too long or you might not be able to come along and see us. One last thing we talk about on today's summer podcast, and this goes back to something that happened back before the Dáil recess. Parties of the further left appealing to Sinn Féin for a sort of an alliance in relation to getting votes in a general election. And there was a sort of a call to arms before the European local elections. It didn't work. There have been some efforts amongst parties of the left to coalesce on local councils since the local elections, with again limited success. Some parties like the Labour Party and the Green Party get left out on the basis that they have dared to coalesce with the centre parties in the past. Where lies the potential, do you think, Ivan, for these parties of the left? Because if they didn't make their breakthrough in the wake of the financial crash, either in the 2011 or the 2016 general election, when, if ever, will they?
Well, first of all, if we stand back and look at the landscape, you have kind of what you describe as the hard left, Independence for Change, People Before Profit, remnants of the Workers' Party that didn't join DL.
Sorry, are you saying Independence for Change are left?
Yeah.
Which ones?
Joan Collins in South Central. She's one of them.
Sorry, there's so many with these independents. I'm mixing them up with others. Yes.
So the remnants of the Workers' Party that didn't join DL, which joined Labour, and then you have the soft left, which is Labour, Soc Dems and Greens. Look, the first thing about unity of the left is, you see, politicians in the centre parties, and some people call them right-wing parties, They actually do what I say, which is the abiding principle of politics: find out what the voters want and give it to them. So Bertie, when he got 3 consecutive terms, went through a socialist phase. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do, yeah.
He was a socialist. And of course, he was never a socialist. But he
drove Joe Higgins mad. Joe Higgins said, "You're a socialist. No, I'm a socialist. Don't you be claiming to a socialist when I am, and we don't agree on anything."
So the centre parties, whatever way the wind is blowing, they are pragmatic at heart. They believe in a market economy, but they will twist and turn in the wind. Whereas the problem with people in the real hard left is they really believe in this ideology. They see it as a kind of Trotskyite or different variations of Marxism and so on.
No compromise is allowed, is it?
It's an ideology, which is no place to be in Irish politics, in my opinion. So therefore, the defining factor is who is prepared to go into government. And this is what happens with cycles with the Green Party and the Labour Party. They build up a head of steam, Gilmore's Gale, the Green Wave, and all this kind of thing. They go into government and 5 years later they get turfed out on their backside. And the truth of it is that, you campaign in opposition, in poetry. In the real world, you've got to make tough decisions that meet with the Department of Finance. So, look, let's be honest about this. This country is pretty left. We have the highest rates of social welfare in Europe. We actually have quite...
We have the most progressive income tax system.
Exactly. So, I mean, my point is this, that if we look at my overall view as we face into the general election, is 40% want to see the government re-elected, 40% don't, there's 20% in between. Of the 40% that don't, they principally are made up of left-wing people.
Is Sinn Féin a left-wing party?
It's a Republican party. Yes, it is a left-wing party. Look, anyone who promises a 3% surtax on income tax over 140 grand, that you lose your full tax credits 100 grand, who favour a 1% charge on any asset, liquid or illiquid, by 1% a year in a wealth tax, I have to say, they are socialistic policies.
But will that limit Sinn Féin's potential with voters, given that it does seem that the majority of Irish voters, while they will assume left economic and liberal social issues, they want the centre parties to do it almost as a sort of a bulwark against everything been from the left?
And for me, the biggest dividing line of right and left is when it comes to property. So we have generation renter, and then we have the market in property. Like when, Mary Lou said 300 grand houses, someone said, my house is worth 600 grand. I don't think it's a good idea to devalue my house by half. So this has manifested itself in two things. All of the left want the next government to have an eviction ban and a rent cap, a rent freeze as well as a rent cap. Whereas the other people say, well, this might drive investment out of building new apartments, of providing rented accommodation, which 200,000 units have disappeared, which is causing the crisis there. So, and Sinn Féin are very much in the same camp. Look,
but hold on, you see, this thing, property thing, I mean, Irish socialists are not socialists when it comes to property. Now, we spoke recently about Sinn Féin's new plans in relation to affordable housing to be built on land that the state would retain ownership of, which is a sort of a socialist policy. But on things like low property taxes, all of the parties of the left want the family home to be exempted. This is the type of idea that would have socialists all over Europe tearing their hair out, saying that most people's wealth is tied up in their homes. And that's why you tax it. If they have bigger homes that are worth more, that is wealth, and therefore you tax it. Whereas Irish socialists are completely against that.
And Sinn Féin proposing the abolition of local property tax, which brings in, whatever it is, 400 million plus a year, is progressive insofar as that if you don't have a house, you don't pay it. If you're a tenant, you don't pay it. So I can't understand how that's a socialist principle. The other thing that's happened in the history of the left in this country...
it's regressive rather than...
Yeah, regressive. Yeah. The other point is this, that actually the Labour Party and the left actually had their clothes stolen for them, because you take someone like Ivana Bacik. One of the things she really, really believed in the last 20 years was the liberal agenda. In other words, divorce, abortion, legalising it, contraception, divorce, all of that stuff. And the main parties adopted that, which made it a redundant issue. And so therefore, it really comes down to the haves and have-nots. But I do think a transfer pact is a good idea, but I also think if you look at the election of Aodhán Ó Ríordáin, right? I was looking at the first count there and I said, you know what? Aodhán Ó Ríordáin is top of this pile. If you throw in the Cuff of the Greens, if you throw in all the left-wing candidates, you know what I mean?
Transfers will be enough to elect him.
Exactly. And this was in the context of Sinn Féin getting a seat as well. So actually, you can look at the elimination of various left-wing candidates, Breed Smith being a case in point, and you can say that there is already de facto a transfer pact in place.
Okay. But would they ever be able to form a government? Well, two things in relation to that. One, I can't see them together getting enough seats to actually do so. But if they were by some miracle to get the seats, they'd never agree on a government coalition pact, would they?
Well, unless they wanted it to last 5 years. But this is exactly what France is doing now.
Yeah, but it'll come back to the ideology thing that you were mentioning, in that, they would try and put together a patchwork coalition or whatever, but that you would have Richard Boyd Barrett and Paul Murphy would say, no, that's not socialist enough, that's not left enough, and it would become impossible for them. They might go into government, but how long would they stay in government together? Or would they change? I mean, you'd look back, when you went into government under John Bruton in the mid-1990s, you had both Labour and Democratic left. So you had Prunchius de Rosa in the cabinet, and Pat Rabbitte was a former Super Junior, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Before he later went on with the Democratic left-Labour merger and to become leader of the Labour Party. But when you got into the coalition bed with these lefties, what was it like?
Absolutely not a problem. Dick Spring, he was prickly, not by socialism, that was just his cantankerous nature, but I liked him. Rory Quinn was someone that you could do business with, absolutely, and he was in the pivotal finance thing. But actually I found De Rosa and Bruton got on like a house on fire. It was actually easier to operate a tripartite arrangement, as with this government, than a kind of you win, I lose in a two-party government. But it will be very instructive to see how the French story emerges, because Macron's misadventure into a general election led to a situation where, to stop Le Pen and the National Rally, they created this new Popular Front, which was all the fragmentation of the left put together. So they're putting together a government based on the United Popular Front. Will this hold together? And this is the fundamental problem in your political career. If you're a socialist, you take the view, well, at least half a loaf is better than no bread at all. I'll do this and that for pensioners or for equality, for, like take Starmer now putting VAT on private education. At least I'll do something. Whereas Corbyn will never achieve anything. And he can have all his principles and all his ideology, but you know what? It's a hill of beans.
But you have to compromise on things.
Absolutely.
And there are certain people on the left who are not prepared to compromise, which is why you wonder that even if they got the chance, would the likes of Paul Murphy and Richard Boyd Barrett ever go into a government?
A little bit hollow vessels making most sound.
Okay, we're probably finishing
there
up a little bit.
There was a couple of other emails.
Do you want to do a couple of emails?
Thomas Carneen tells this story that he was on the Dart and he fell on top of me. And he,
Are you sure it wasn't the other way around?
Actually, that's what I thought, exactly. Because it'd be coming out of the Aviva or something like that, and I'd be poured out of it. Do you know what I mean? So basically, he stumbled on top of me. I ignored him, and he was too embarrassed to say hello because he recognised me. That reminds me, I had a desperate incident in Galway, which I won't go into now, where someone crashed into my bedroom at 1:30 at night and then recognised me. To my mortification, I told him to F off. But anyway, we have Councillor Mark.
By what distinguishing features did they recognise you?
They just saw me in bed in my pyjamas and said, "Oh, I know you." So anyway, Councillor Mark Duffy writes in a long. He's a Mayo County councillor from elected in 2019 for Ballina, and he describes the frustrations of not being affecting the county development plan and so on, and saying that Mayo is only meeting 30% of the housing demand and so on. It is absolutely the truth that between the Niall Cousins in the OPR, councillors have been emasculated. But those same councillors are doing county development plans that stop wind farms, that do other things. But
this is going to be so important for something we mentioned a number of weeks back. When the population is going to be increasing so much, we're going to need these houses. If we're going to have the houses, we have to have the infrastructure, such as the wind farms to generate the electricity. After so many things, and if we think we're having problems in dealing with things now, God knows what it's going to be like.
So development plans.
So the development plan is crucial.
They have to facilitate these developments, all 31 of them. Finally, hi Matt. Right with you. This is from Mark Cook. Right on with you on the USC. And God, I hope it's halved or even better. And Ivan is wrong. For me, it's nearly $2,000 every year, an emergency tax that was necessary for the country's survival. It's supposed to be temporary. And Kenny said FG would abolish it, but there it is on my payslip month after month. It's an outrage that budget surpluses aren't being directed to long-term savings and funds, and what they call the rainy day fund is still being taxed. I'm the one holding the umbrella. Every day is a rainy day, for Christ's sake, and it's well past time it was abolished. It had better be a good budget. You actually feel there will be significant USC reform.
No, I'm not sure. I think politically it would be clever.
You're not getting back up on the fence again, are you?
No, I'm saying that politically it would be clever to have significant USC reform, but I don't think that's the way the government is thinking, because it's got so many now demands upon its tax package, which is looking at, and when you look at things like the electricity credits,
cost of living,
we spoke recently, when you look at what they're going to maybe do on VAT and electricity and gas, suddenly the amount of money available to them is smallening all the time. They also want to deal with the bans and the credits and stuff to make sure that against inflation people don't lose out. So I think there will be a cut to the USC, but I think it's going to be at the lower levels. It's going to be in people on lower incomes, and it's also going to be quite marginal to the extent that too many people won't notice too much. And that listener has a very good point to make about the 2016 campaign that was run by Fine Gael. Let's abolish the USC. Okay, they didn't get back into power in the numbers they expected to, so they were operating a minority government. Look with Fianna Fáil propping it up, so they can argue that they didn't get the opportunity to reduce the USC as promised. But it doesn't really look like they wanted to. There will be some changes, but just looking at the way the numbers are stacking up at the moment, I don't think it's going to be a sort of a Hey Martha moment.
His central point, though, is things, I remember October 2010, Brian Lennon's emergency budget, and USC emergency tends to be part of the furniture.
Yeah. Were you one of the pensioners who protested at that time?
No. I've never found the need to protest. I can get things done without.
Do you remember
protesting.
them when they occupied the church down in?
That was they're losing their medical cards.
Yeah.
Oh, the Crinkleys, they'd give you a pain in your face. Yeah.
You are very close to picking up your own free travel card.
No, I'm not. No, this is shocking. I thought I was going to get at 65, which I will be in October. I have to wait till I'm 66. And I am such a frequent user of Lewis, Dart, rail,
You're
buses.
Going to save a fortune, aren't you?
No, well, put it like this, it can't come quick enough.
Okay, listen, we leave it there. And just to remind you again, ticketmaster.ie for the Olympia on the September the 11th, a Wednesday night, and corkoperahouse.ie if you want tickets for the Cork event, which is on September 13th, a Friday night. So we'll be back with an up-to-date podcast next week. Hope very much you join us. Remember as well to let your friends know this can be got at Spotify, Apple, wherever it is you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. So from me, Matt Cooper.
And from me, Ivan Yates.
Hope you're enjoying a great August holiday.